Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm really excited today. We're going to talk about what if Colorado schools were number one. So I have with me Jamie Trafficanda. She is with Colorado Succeeds, and Chris Brown with the Common Sense Policy Roundtable. Welcome, you guys. How are you today?
Great.
Yeah, fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come back.
Yes, of course. But before we get started, I have a few announcements for our listeners out there. We had the newsletter go out today that goes out every Tuesday, so be sure to log on to cobrt.com. It's on our front page there. Check out what we've been up to, what our partners have been up to, and check out the events page while you're there so you can see what else we've got going on. But let's go ahead and jump right in with this. What if Colorado schools were number one? So I know that you guys partnered to get this initiative out there. Let's talk a little bit about the background of both Colorado Succeeds and CSPR, which I will now refer to it as for the rest of the show.
First.
Sure. A little bit of background about CSPR. We are a Colorado-based, not-for-profit, free enterprise think tank. So our mission is to study significant economic and policy issues that matter for the economic well-being and prosperity of all Coloradans.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and Colorado Succeeds, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan network of Colorado companies from all across the state, all different industries and sizes, who all come together around improving education in the state and making sure Colorado businesses have a talent pipeline to thrive.
Wonderful. And we are partners with both of you guys,
Yes.
which has been really lovely because one of the big things that we like to focus on here at Colorado Business Roundtable is workforce development, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of where this is coming from. So how did this come about? What made you sit down and decide that we needed to focus on making Colorado schools number one?
Yeah, so this project was dreamt up about a year ago between the leaders of our organization and different leaders in the state around business and education. And so Scott LeBand, president of Colorado Succeeds, and Kristen Strom, the head of CSPR, sat down and wanted to look at, Colorado is doing great in all aspects for the most part. Our economy is thriving. We are a go-to state for so many different reasons, but education consistently needs to be improved. And so we wanted to really elevate this as a key issue in the upcoming gubernatorial race and kind of present new data that would show the candidates why they should prioritize this and really show that this impacts business, this impacts voters statewide. And if we were to improve education for all kids across the state, we'd see a tremendous return on investment.
Yes. And that was my favorite part. So I'm going to ask our audience to go to coloradosucceeds.org/best-schools/home to find this study. Actually, it's exactly where it's at for you. And you can see exactly what each of the gubernatorial candidates has to say about education policy, right?
Yeah, we surveyed major candidates around this, and we asked them 7 or so questions on key education issues, ranging from early childhood education, our youngest kids, up to workforce development and the talent pipeline, and kind of everything in between. And so you can go on there, bestschoolsco.org is our short link that we put together to see where all the candidates stand on those big issues, including workforce development.
Co.org is much easier to remember. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, they put a lot of work. I can't take any credit for that, but Jamie and her team put a lot of work. So bestschoolsco.org is where all this information is.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little.
Even I can remember that.
Yeah. Right? And
Yeah.
you didn't even write it down.
It's just, yep.
So we have a lot of information in this pamphlet and on the website. One of the things that I found really intriguing was that 77% of employers struggle to find Coloradans with the right skills. And by skills, we mean soft skills. We mean workforce labor skills, those hard skills as well. We're talking skills across the board, right?
Writing, reading, math.
Yes. Writing, reading, arithmetic, right? So we got some great statistics. How did you go about finding those?
Yeah, so this initiative consists of a few different pieces. And so in addition to the candidate survey that we talked about and the economic modeling that we conducted to see that return on investment, we also surveyed voters statewide on these key education issues, and we did a statewide a survey of business leaders as well. And so what we really wanted to see is, what do voters care about and what are their views on education, and what do employers think about education? And what we found from that was a ton of alignment between the two groups. Both agree that there are some ways that we can improve the education system. And not only do they agree on, yes, we need to improve Colorado schools, but they also agree on those really high ROI strategies for improving Colorado schools. We found that about 90% of employers and voters support the same strategies, such as attracting and retaining effective teachers, providing more work-based learning and career and technical education. And that's all reflected in the website as well.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Obviously, we need to go to our voters because they're paying taxes for schools and things like that. We need to check with our business industry leaders because they're going to hire within Colorado, hopefully more so than out of state. But what about the kids? Has anyone asked them their thoughts on the current school system and what they would like to see improve?
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
if you guys conducted the survey, please. Yeah, you guys led the survey. I can talk. Yeah, please.
Yeah. One of the big buckets of work that Colorado Succeeds does is really going into schools and seeing what's working and talking to educators and talking to their industry partners. And I think we need to talk to kids more, but what we've seen and what our research shows, nationwide, is that kids are craving more relevant and engaging learning opportunities. And we know that when kids are engaged, Gallup has some really great research around this, that engaged students are hopeful students and hopeful students are successful students. And so I think the more that we can provide opportunities in schools that engage kids and show them a path for their future, if they're scared about paying for college, you don't have to. Or if they don't want to go to college, you don't have to. You can learn while you earn by getting a certificate, and then maybe 10 years down the road, if you want to upskill and get your 4-year degree, you can. I think it's all about showing kids that there are different pathways to get to a self-sustaining career and your steps after high school. And so I think that kids are really craving those different options, especially, student loan debt at record highs, right? And college just seeming really, unattainable for so many. And it's important to show that there are so many different pathways to get there. You don't have to get there tomorrow. You can get there down the road, but you can get there.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the students are at the center of this work. I mean, they're at the center of the questions in the survey. They're at the center of the responses from the candidates. They're at the heart of the analysis related to the economic impact. So, I mean, it's a great question, and and ultimately the students are the motivation. In terms of providing the opportunity for a lifetime as an adult in a career, and providing the opportunity not just for the employers, but really it's about their economic opportunity as well. And that's really the basis for our study and our responses.
Right. Well, and kids, right? When you're interested in something, you're motivated to learn. And the earlier we can get kids motivated to learn, I think we're going to have better outcomes within the education system.
Definitely. Yeah. Exposure is key. We like to say, if you can see it, you can be it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important to show all kids, here's what you can be in the future.
Right, and it's not just doctor or lawyer. Yeah. These are attainable jobs, and
right.
I had a gentleman with us yesterday. His name was Albie Segal, and he's with the Emily Griffith Foundation. He's talking about the Emily Griffith Technical College, and instead of saying blue collar jobs, he talked new collar jobs, which I thought was a great term. And a lot of people have such a stigma surrounding that, but there's definitely plenty of technical careers that you can get out there with just a certificate and make great money doing it.
Yeah, these are high-paying, skilled jobs.
Absolutely.
Very desirable career paths.
Yes. So let me ask you, Jamie, what is your favorite part about this study that you've done?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things that stands out to me is that we really had all of the candidates answer the same questions when it comes to education challenges and priorities. And what that helps voters to do is really compare side by side. Here's where each candidate lands on these issues. And so they don't have to read an article that maybe quotes some, or go on their website and try to hunt down this information, or, attend some sort of gathering. They can just go on our website and see, here's where all the candidates stand on early childhood education. Here's what all of them think about talent pipeline and workforce development. And so as someone who wants to be informed when I make a decision this June and again this November, I think that's definitely the part that stands out to me.
Absolutely. How about for you, Chris? What's your favorite part?
I think it was really interesting to see the alignment in some of the results. So we were brought into this project, participate in this project for a lot of reasons that Jamie went over, but we specifically focus on economic impact analysis and trying to quantify these big complex issues. And at the end of the day, we produced the results that talked about the value of improving education and how that really compared to a lot of the other economic drivers. But what stood out for me when we looked at the surveys that came back from employers, that came back from voters, was actually one in particular. From the voters, they prioritized education as the number 2 priority, I believe the number 2 priority behind broad economic issues. So in a survey of all issues that voters are motivated by, education was number 2 behind economic issues. But when you talk about the results that you mentioned in terms of 72 or I believe 77% of employers have already had a hard time in terms of finding the right talent, and 86, I may be getting ahead of myself, but 86% believe that talent pipeline, that shortage, the skills gap is a threat to their future business. And then when you accompany that with the results in terms of just how every incremental graduating class can add to the economy, for me, it really showed that education, improving the education, is an economic issue, almost the most significant economic issue that we face as a state. And so that alignment in terms of what the voters see, what businesses are saying, and the results really show that this is an economic issue and up there with the number 1 issue in the state.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we had 20 business groups statewide come together on this, including Colorado Business Roundtable, to join us and say, education matters. Let's focus on it. And I think that's one of the most compelling things walking away from this is just how many business groups across the state are committed to kind of, rising above partisan politics, looking beyond election cycles and saying, hey, let's have a solutions-oriented conversation around this.
And because of that commitment from the business community, Jamie's organization, and others, we had, again, at our launch event 2 weeks ago now. I can't believe it was that long ago.
Yeah, it's been a lifetime since then.
Yeah, and again, you can find all the results in terms of the responses from the candidates. We had each of the gubernatorial candidates, or nearly each, all of the 90% plus 90% participation rate in terms of responses. They came to the event. They responded directly to questions. So we were able to get a lot of engagement from the gubernatorial candidates, which again, I give a lot of kudos to Jamie and her team for driving that.
That is huge. And once again, to reiterate for our audience, visit bestschoolsco.org to find out what those candidates had to say. It's really interesting, actually. We're going to have Jared Polis on tomorrow, so I might stab him with one of those questions if I can, just to see if he changes his answer.
That's right.
So we're talking, what if Colorado schools were number 1? Where are we right now in terms of the country?
Yeah, not number 1, I guess, would be the short answer. If that's
Thank you.
helpful
That's easy.
for listeners.
I should start using that.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting, premise to the discussion. And I'll preface this. There was and this is a little bit off topic, a little bit of time, but
yeah.
We've been setting the stage. There was a report that came out from U.S. News and World Report that ranked states by a host of different indicators in terms of infrastructure, state policy. They ranked Colorado 10 overall. So overall, Colorado, I think, ranked 10th in terms of all metrics.
We're in the top 5th.
Okay, right. But
terrible.
We have the number 1 economy. Okay, so of all states, Colorado has the number 1 economy.
Which I did not know. Congratulations, Colorado.
That's right. Data compiled by McKinsey & Co., put out by U.S. News and World Report, is an interesting backstop to this discussion.
Yeah.
Education ranked, in terms of graduation rate, what was it?
I think it was 30th in the study for Colorado.
Could have been 30th in terms of overall education, but in terms of what we attempted to quantify and what we think is a really solid performance metric that is a strong indicator of ultimate student success, graduation rates, Colorado ranks 46th. So in terms of where that gap is, in terms of So that's students that graduate within 4 years of entering high school. It's about 79% statewide is the statewide average. U.S. average is about 84%. So we are not in the top.
Definitely behind.
Top percentile. That's right.
Yeah.
In terms of graduation rates.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is that was the original question that we thought we could build a framework to say it's not just about graduating, it's about obtaining the types of education that the workforce demands. But we started with graduation rates and that disparity. We are currently ranked 46 in terms of overall graduation rate statewide. But there's significant research that talks about the education demand, the demand for post-secondary education throughout the state. And there was a study of every state put out by this Georgetown Center on Workforce Education, I believe, is the organization that created the study that matched employment jobs that are currently being demanded and projected to be demanded against the types of education that would be needed to fill those jobs. Currently, Colorado ranks second in terms of requirement for post-secondary education in our labor market.
Okay.
DC is number one, and as they're not a state, we actually like to think that jokingly Colorado is number one.
It's not jokingly. I'll take that very
technically tied
Yes.
with Minnesota, but up there, one or two in terms of the amount of education that is required for the workforce, for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And when you measure that against a graduation rate of 46th for our K-12 students, you get the picture.
Yeah. So we're all over the board then when it comes to actual placement. But I love this initiative, right? Making us number one across the board in all these aspects. What actual age group or grades are we looking at? Are we talking K through 12? Are we talking just high school? Are we talking middle school through high school? Where do we want this to apply to?
Yeah, it's really preschool to post-secondary.
Okay.
To really improve the education system, we have to break down the silos, and we have to stop saying that, we're going to just focus on high school and not think about higher ed. Like, everything blends into one another. A strong early education system blends into the rest of the K-12, trajectory into higher ed or workforce training. And so when we look at the recommendations that came out of this, they really do take that preschool to post-secondary view.
Okay.
It starts with high quality early learning, and it goes into, high quality K-12 into higher education and, credentialing or other opportunities post high school.
Right. And I just, for the metrics sake, what kind of metrics are we looking at when we judge this?
So like I said,
Yeah.
the percentage of jobs that require some form of post-secondary education here in the state of Colorado is 74%.
Right.
So 74% of all jobs require some form of post-secondary education. It's the way that we gauge this was, and that's broken down by the type of post-secondary education across master's, bachelor's, but the way in which and we'll talk about, I think in the second segment related to the actual results, the way that we built this up was, on average, there's a difference in earnings and productivity across each of those levels of post-secondary attainment. And that earnings translates to additional disposable income, again, that productivity for businesses. And so, to Jamie's point, ultimately it matters across the entire pipeline. The education, the engagement, the success of the student in terms of obtaining that post-secondary really starts much sooner than 18, undoubtedly. But the way that we can measure the economic benefits in terms of productivity and earnings really is distinguished by the final level of education that's obtained. And that's how the study on our end on the economic impacts was put together. But it's ultimately about every graduating class. A little over 66,000 students are part of every K-12 graduating class. And so the difference between the current graduation rate and the best in the country So currently at 79%, best in the country is 93% roughly. I used a 5-year graduation rate, not to be too nuanced between, so it's a difference in Colorado of 84 to 93%. That 9 to 10% gap is about 6,000, roughly 6,600 students. So we're talking about a change in the outcomes of about 6,600 Colorado students every year that currently are not graduating, that ultimately that's 6,600 next year and compounding for the foreseeable future. So that's the basis. We really emphasize the outcomes of every graduating class and the potential for earnings and productivity associated with improving your level of attainment, education.
Thank you. I noticed on the website, again, bestschoolsco.org. I'm going to ask our audience to go there when we go to a break here in a few minutes. But one of the things that I saw was that voters support attracting and retaining effective teachers. That was one of the things that they really wanted to focus on. And there were about 4, I think, different points there that the voters were focusing on. As far as that's concerned, what programs or policies do we have that we're implementing to help get these strategies in practice?
Yeah, so we found that about 90% of voters and employers think that attracting and retaining effective teachers is the top improvement strategy for Colorado schools. And we know that educators are the ones who are closest to our students, and therefore they have the greatest impact. And so, we see that you hear about the educator shortage in Colorado. Coming out of the legislative session, there was a ton of resources and strategies dedicated to supporting Colorado educators, attracting more Colorado educators, and making this a place that they want to move and take on the teaching profession. I also think that it's really important to professionalize the profession. Our Colorado educators have gone to school for this. They have advanced degrees in this, and we need to treat our educators like the professionals that they are.
Well said. I absolutely.
I'm like watching the clock, count down. So. I'm like, how much time do I have to get into that?
But as far as those programs or policies, getting those into the place, I would imagine that we're asking our gubernatorial candidates to really focus on that, right?
Yeah. That is going to be, again, such an important issue for voters and employers. And we want to make sure that the candidates know how much voters and employers care about this, and come to the table with really high ROI improvement strategies for, elevating Colorado educators and supporting them.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that was really the focus. The emphasis was getting information to the candidates, to the general public about the value of improving our education system, about the sentiments of business, about the sentiment of voters, so that those strategies, those priorities, those policies can come to the forefront as the next sort of leadership takes the helm.
Well, what would you like to get into in the next segment? I know that we're probably going to go a little more over this overview of the actual study and the findings, but I think we might get into the current itinerary. Where are we in our steps to moving this forward with your business partners that have come on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be really interesting to share with your audience the findings from our economic modeling, just how big of an impact this would have on Colorado's economy, and kind of like what's working right now. I think there is some great stuff in Colorado. Like, yes, we can and we have to improve education for all kids, but there is some great work happening out there. That deserves a spotlight.
Absolutely. So we are going to take a quick break here on Connect and Collaborate. Stay with us at cobrt.com/live. For this episode and more, check out cobrt.com/radio-podcast. And in the meantime, please check out what the gubernatorial candidates had to say, some of these findings for yourself at bestschoolsco.org. Any last thoughts here in the last few seconds that we've got?
No, I think we covered it all. We could talk. Jamie and I have talked about this a lot, and we could keep talking for hours. But excited to share these findings, and again, it really emphasizes why this is an economic issue, and which is the number one issue in voters' minds.
All right, we'll be right back. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, and once again, we are talking what if Colorado schools were number one. One of the biggest things that we like to get behind here at the Colorado Business Roundtable is workforce development, which is where this was sort of brought out. I have with me once again Jamie Trafficanda with Colorado Succeeds and Chris Brown with Common Sense Policy Roundtable, or CSPR as I've lovingly dubbed it from now on. So welcome back. We had that 5-minute break there. We got some statistics to talk about now that we're back from break. I'm very excited about this. So I want to start out talking about this skills gap, something that we've talked about on multiple shows across multiple different sectors within Colorado, right? Skills gap is very important. So how does this skills gap affect being number one?
Yeah, we've heard from our members and just Colorado's business community for years now, as I'm sure COBRT has and others, about, the issue that Colorado skills gap creates. We know it creates real challenges for Colorado employers, but within our employer survey, which is a part of our business guide for Colorado's next governor, we really wanted to ask employers, what specific parts of the skills gap are the most challenging to you, and how does it affect your business, your bottom line? And we saw that more than 50% of employers, and upwards into the 80s on some of these, they lose revenue, they have higher recruiting and training costs, they have lower employee morale, higher employee turnover. This creates real challenges for Colorado employers who they want to hire more Coloradans. They want to invest in our state, but the skills gap really makes that difficult for them. About 86, as Chris said earlier, said that the skills gap is a direct threat to their business.
Wow, those are impactful words.
Yeah,
most definitely. And how would employers invest if there wasn't a skills gap?
Yeah, so that's another great question, and something we wanted to ask employers as part of the survey as well. We wanted to know, if you were not facing the skills gap, how would you invest in Colorado? How would you invest in your employees? And we saw that overwhelmingly, they wanted to do so in such a positive way. That included hiring more Coloradans. About 85% or so said they would hire more Coloradans for Colorado jobs. About 84 or 85% also said that they would increase employee compensation and invest more in their employees. So again, as Chris said, this is an economic issue that would benefit all Coloradans.
Yeah, so more vacation days maybe too.
We didn't ask about vacation. We asked about charitable giving. That would also go up. But
yeah. I need a raise, boss.
Yeah, for all you nonprofits out there, education matters.
Exactly. What were you going to add on to that, Chris?
Well, what I would add is for your listeners that want some numbers as you're driving, listening to this.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get through this. If I can get through some of these numbers related to the skills gap. What we actually studied on the economic impact study, and maybe just to reiterate, and as we talked about in the first segment, on the website bestschoolsco.org, there is an employer survey, a candidate survey, and a polling of Colorado voters, along with this economic impact analysis. What we focused on in the terms of defining the skills gap was really defining the education needs of today's labor market against the education outcomes of Colorado's K-12 students. So we tried to put it in terms of those that are going through Colorado schools, individuals are going through Colorado schools, how does that match up with the demands of the workforce? So it's not really skills. Skills are important. We tried to quantify it in terms of education. And one metric, just to again reiterate, 74% of all jobs in Colorado require some form of post-secondary education. According to the Georgetown Center on Education and Workforce. I think I missaid that in the first segment, but said 74% of all jobs require some form of post-secondary education. The talent pipeline, the Department of Higher Education here in the state of Colorado, says that currently about 64% of all Colorado adults have some post-secondary education currently. They have a goal of 66%. That's their target goal for education, for post-secondary education for all Coloradans. Our findings suggest that about 46% of all Colorado native educated students have some form of post-secondary education. So that gap in terms of education demand from the workforce at 74%, when only 46% roughly of all students coming through the current K-12 pipeline have some form of post-secondary education. That is a significant gap, and that's really what we're talking about in closing that gap and the value that's created not only to the students themselves in terms of lifetime earnings potential and other significant benefits, but to our employers and really closing that gap. I mean, a big issue, we have a booming economy, a fantastic economy, number one economy, as we talked about, according to U.S. News and World Report, but that comes with a very low unemployment rate and a challenge to find people. When you have a low unemployment rate, it's a benefit in terms of people are working, but it's a challenge to employers. And Colorado is blessed with a beautiful environment and a beautiful state that people want to move to. And so that remains the primary way in bringing in talent. But if you're able to produce more, it's not the right. If you're able to see more of your K-12 graduates meet those demands, you're able to fill those jobs with Colorado educated students, as opposed to having them not be successful and not competing in today's workforce and falling behind in terms of earnings and productivity. That does have a drag over the long run.
And importing talent is just another significant cost for Colorado employers. It's in the double digits of millions.
I guess I didn't realize that. Do you mind explaining that a little bit further for me?
Yeah, a couple years back, this stat is a little bit outdated, and I'm sure the Colorado Workforce Development Council, their talent pipeline report has a more updated number. But we found in our field guide that Colorado employers spend about $19 million annually importing skilled workers to fill jobs in the state. That's probably from around, 2015 or so. That's
alarming.
Yeah.
And surprising, actually. Yeah. I am not a native, I should admit that. And so I did come here about 8 years ago seeking a job, right? The job that I got was I could live anywhere in the world and do that job. It didn't matter. I just happened to move here because my sister had moved here and I followed her out. But I did not realize that most of employers are spending so much money.
Yeah,
to import
it's
the right.
It's a big challenge.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit more about the economic impact of the skills gap, if you don't mind getting into more details on that.
Sure, I'd be happy to jump into it. So again, we set up a scenario and ran through a model that we use, a customized simulation model for the state of Colorado called developed by REMI. So we have a couple tools, but one in particular that allows us to simulate or estimate over a number of years. We put out a 10 and 20 year projection for the economic impacts, the value to the Colorado economy in terms of GDP, income, earnings, tax revenue, and some savings estimates in terms of incarceration rates and in terms of public assistance overall in terms of budgetary effects, and tried to quantify going from today's education system to what we framed as the number one in the state, in the country. And the way we line this up, the primary driver was started out to be graduation rates. And what if we could improve the graduation rate to the number one in the country, going from 46 to number one? But it really morphed into that wasn't enough. Our original scenario, we realized after finding that 74% of all jobs require some form of post-secondary education, that just having the number one graduation rate with current rates of post-secondary attainment of our graduates was simply not enough. So we changed the scenario to say, number one is not just the number one graduation rate. It's actually getting students to not just graduate, but also to go on to some form of obtain some form of post-secondary education at a higher rate. So we looked at our economic impact study was to study again over a 10, 20-year window to try to emphasize the fact that we're not just talking about one graduating class, but we're talking about students that graduated this May, students that are going to graduate next May, and that compounding impact has a massive effect, again, over just 10, 20 years. At any point in time, you probably have somewhere between 40, 50 graduating high school classes, working, living, and so just incrementally improving that to where you now would have 10, 20, 30 additional classes. And it takes time. We realize it's going to take time to get there, but that incremental impact and that benefit of retaining and having people not fall behind is significant. So the findings, the findings that we like to point out is with just 10 graduating classes. So what we did is we did, again, we have a study that points this out in terms of year-over-year impacts and the impact of a single class, but the impact of just 10 graduating classes would add something like $3.6 billion in additional output to the Colorado economy. And when you measure that against some of the larger economic drivers of the state, the entire ski industry, the entire impact of the entire ski industry in the state of Colorado contributes about $4.8 billion. So 10 graduating classes, just the incremental improvement of 10 graduating classes, not the entire impact of the class, but just improving 10 graduating classes over 10 years, is $3.6 billion compared to the ski industry at $4.8. Denver International Airport, the entire operations of the airport annually contribute about $10 billion. So it's about 10 classes, about a third of that. The entire craft brewing industry generates about $3 billion. So 10 classes is larger than that. And our national Western Stock Show, which is a huge economic driver, contributes about $115 million annually. So $3.6 billion is
quite a few shows.
Three. Yeah,
it matters.
Yeah, that's right. It matters. It's
Yeah.
significant. It's comparable, and the additional earnings on average that students would earn would be between an additional $15,000 to $20,000 on average per graduate, if they were able to not just graduate but also obtain some form of higher education. One more small piece to this, we isolated a couple populations within every graduating class. What's one thing in particular that stood out to us is that 46%, roughly 45% of every graduating class, or I guess the current graduating class, and for the foreseeable future, every graduating class, is designated as economically disadvantaged in the sense that they qualify for free and reduced lunch, or that of lower economic means, and their graduation rate lags. So they are 45% of every graduating class. If we were able to just improve the graduation rate of just the economically disadvantaged to go from where it's currently at about 75% to 93%, or the best in the country, you would effectively bring up the overall state average to 92.3%. So just focusing on those students who are most at risk in terms of not completing high school, not going on to post-secondary education, just focusing on their graduation rate and getting them through school and motivated has a dramatic effect on the overall graduation rate and outcomes for all Colorado students. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just say the impact is remarkable, and you hear these really big numbers, whether it's an impact to GDP or additional earnings. But I think what's really exciting is that this really does create value for everyday Coloradans. Coloradans, if we improved education to the levels needed, they'd be wealthier. It would create more jobs over 10 years, about 14,000. There'd be more spending on homes, and fewer Coloradans would be incarcerated. The state would save money, and it would have additional tax revenue. And so these are very real things that affect people in their everyday lives in this state.
Right. And we talk a lot about, and these findings are phenomenal, by the way, and again, you can find that at the website, but we talk a lot about the fact that we need to improve. Where are we going with improving? Right? Who are we asking to do these improvements? Obviously, we've got our gubernatorial candidates under fire here for making sure that they're focusing on education. But do we have anything in place with Colorado Workforce Development Council or other entities. I hate to call them out. I'm not calling them out.
They're doing great work. No,
yeah, they are doing great work.
I think something that we were really excited to see come out of the statewide poll that we did of Colorado voters is that 72% of voters statewide want business to play a larger role in improving education in the state. And the business community, we know from working with them, wants to be involved in that too. And so there's this great synergy between voters and employers wanting to come together to improve schools and deliver better outcomes for kids in the state overall. And I think that Colorado is a huge leader in this nationally. We have so many different, policies and programs that have created great opportunities for kids. And we really stand out for that. And so I think there is a ton of momentum behind this. It's really scaling. It's going deeper.
Right.
And, we have more apprenticeships in the state. We have more credentialing in the state. These opportunities that allow kids to get really relevant education for their next step after high school. And a business can look at them and say, this kid has this credential, they can work, tomorrow. And so there's a ton happening right now already in Colorado, and we're really excited to see that. Yeah. But it's really about broadening opportunity and access.
Yeah. Do you mind mentioning some of the programs that we've already got in place that people may not be thinking about right now?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a handful out there that I draw attention to. A couple years ago, we brought what are called P-Tech schools to Colorado, and that stands for Pathways in Technology Early College High School. And it is a 9th grade through 14 model where kids, they not only graduate with their high school diploma, they graduate with their associate's degree and relevant experience under their belt from an industry partner who partners with the school, the high school, and a community college to really deliver a well-rounded curriculum. And that's IBM who has really led that. And so Colorado has P-Tech schools. We also have more credentialing opportunities. And so about a year ago, we created, Colorado legislators passed the Career Success Program. A lot of stakeholders came together to create credentialing opportunities for kids. We know that more and more employers are kind of, looking at skills, saying what are the post-secondary either skills or credentials. It's not just a 4-year degree. It's not just a 2-year degree. There are tons of credentials out there that kids can earn that can, show an employer that they are ready to begin a career pathway. And so the Career Success Program rewards school districts financially when they provide credentialing opportunities for students, and students successfully earn those credentials. We're also expanding AP Computer Science. Computer Science and Tech is huge in Colorado. We have thousands of unopened jobs, but only a few graduates a year. A couple hundred computer science graduates, it's a huge gap. And so, last year there was a resource bank for educators was created with computer science materials. Educators can go back to school and get a computer science degree to teach computer science. And computer science education standards, which were created. And education standards really say, here is what kids need to know and be able to do to be proficient in a subject area. And so that's kind of the momentum we're working with in the state and that we're really excited about.
Absolutely, because I do want to reiterate for our audience, while we are excited to improve upon these, we do have a lot of great programs here in place in Colorado to ensure that our students are staying in the state and building upon our number one economy, right? Yes, making sure it's all homegrown. So I have to ask the question here. With these implementations comes the cost of money, right? A little bit of question on how these programs might cost or things like that. I'm going to shoot this over to you, Chris. Thoughts on maybe where that money might come from, or?
Well, we, as part of this study and as part of this project, we, again, intentionally wanted to focus that question to the gubernatorial candidates, inviting them to our launch event, having them respond as part of the survey, and as the next leader in the governor's office, really pose that question to them in terms of solution, in terms of budget priorities. We do include, in a lot of our work, when we talk about the economic impacts, there is a fiscal component to that, no doubt, and economic growth and has a strong revenue aspect, and we include that. So we talk about how additional savings can be seen from each class and how economic growth and those higher earnings generate sales tax, generate income tax, and we quantify that. And so there is undoubtedly a benefit and to improving that can be seen as allowing for dollars to be going to it. But one of the principles, and Jamie can talk a little about how these were formulated, is focusing on the outcome, really focusing on outcomes, really focusing on performance. And so we wanted to emphasize the value and re-engage on why this matters, and really pose it to our next elected officials in terms of how you get there.
Yeah, it's important that the gubernatorial candidates, again, are exposed to this information, all different facets of the business guide that we created for them and for Colorado voters. And we did come up with really high-level principles around what we think Colorado's education system should look like. But it is really up to them, to lead and to work to develop those high ROI strategies that will deliver results.
So what was the most surprising find for you in this survey, Jamie?
From the candidate survey?
Yes.
I would just say how various the candidate answers were. There is so much variety in how they would approach these different issues. And as a nonpartisan organization, for me as an individual, it was just really interesting to see those answers and where they're coming from in this conversation, Democrat or Republican, what have you. Whatever ways they've served Colorado in the past, they all come with their own ideas that have been shaped through their experiences.
Yeah, and for you, Chris?
I would agree. The economic findings, being very involved in them, I was very interested in the component of the economic disadvantage, and that really struck me as a very significant part of the overall solution. How the employer and the voter survey aligned with the results, and sort of how this really fit in with the economic impacts. But the difference, I was actually personally kind of struck by how each of the candidates and their responses, and we did have a Facebook Live of the actual event. So if it's not high quality filming, but if you did want to actually see the actual responses live from the event, you can go to our Facebook page and see that archived high impact footage. But I was really, when they talk about their personal experience with education, each of the candidates have a unique background as it connects to education, and a strong connection and involvement in some way, but it's varied. It's varied, and it shows in their vision. But I was really intrigued by their connection and their responses, and I think it really gives a good sense of where each of them stands. So that was very powerful and really incredible for me to see and have them each respond.
Are your surveys still open? Are you still taking data?
No. So everything was launched on the site, everything from the economic modeling to the candidate survey responses on May 15th.
Okay.
That's all there. And we do have a primary coming up on June 22nd. So I would just urge all Coloradans to go to bestschoolco.org and look at the economic impact, look at the information on the skills gap, the solutions that voters and employers back, and really that candidate survey. And just be prepared to make an informed decision this June, whatever that decision might be.
Besides checking out the website, what is the one thing that you would like voters to focus on as we continue our talks on education with the gubernatorial candidates?
I want them to share this, and I want them to, spread it far and wide, make sure people know about this and that others see just how important education is and how much it would impact the state, and to not forget about this after November 2018. This will continue to live on, and we need to hold Colorado's next governor accountable to making the improvements our state needs.
Absolutely.
This was an incredible project to be a part of, and aligned so well with our mission as an organization to inform those who really have control over the decisions and provide information to elected officials and the decisions that they're making on major public policy issues, but recognize that there is a major component of educating voters on and raising awareness. And we think that by raising awareness, getting this information, you can make more informed decisions. So as Jamie said, look it up, share it, engage with us. Always happy to answer questions. And really that's the purpose of this project, and was incredible to work with Jamie and all of our partners, including COBRT.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jamie and Chris. It's been a pleasure having you on. Be sure to check out this podcast more, cobrt.com/radio. Thank you.